Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I have to say that as a financial sponsor of Students for Liberty, I give money every month. I'm not a wealthy person, but I give a pretty substantial percentage of my income to Students for Liberty. And it's a very, very important organization to me, and I'm happy to see all of you here. I might mention later, I've been in this business for a very, very long time, long before most of you, maybe all of you, were born. And to see the growth of this movement, to me, touches me so deeply. I want to share a quick story with you. A dear friend of mine who died last year, Giancarlo Ibargüen, was a leading businessman in South America. He was the dean of the university. And he told me before he died that one of the proudest things in his life was to sponsor Students for Liberty in Latin America, the Spanish-speaking branch of the organization. And I feel the same way. When I die, I think I'll be proud of being involved with and supporting Students for Liberty. Now, a very frequent challenge that's raised against classical liberalism or libertarian ideas is that it's not suitable for some people. And we hear particularly in Asia about an allegation of Asian values that are somehow unique to Asia, that other people don't share those values, with the suggestion then that liberal or libertarian ideas are not suitable for Asian people. So I want to address the question whether Asian liberty is different from African or South American or North American or European or Australian liberty. Or maybe if liberty is being used in the same way in those different regions, is it a reasonable principle for Asian governments and Asian laws, or, as it is sometimes suggested, are Asian values incompatible with liberty? But first, I would suggest that maybe there's a little bit of arrogance to suggest that there's only one set of values common to a vast region encompassing billions of people, speaking literally hundreds of languages, professing a wide variety of religions, and heirs to thousands of years of multifarious cultural developments. I wonder if there's one set of values called Asian values that go all the way from Mongolia to Japan to Jakarta to Kathmandu and so on. Maybe that's a little bit of an overstatement. There are many different traditions and cultures within a very complex region that is home to over 60% of the human population. But let me then return to the key question. Maybe liberty has different meanings in different places. And the answer is yes, of course it does. Liberty is a word. It's a word that's used in English. It's based on an original Latin word, liber, to be free. And words are not eternal essences. They're human constructs that we use to communicate with each other. So we can admit that. A word may mean different things in different contexts. So instead, let's focus on the constellation of ideas, the connected set of ideas that have come to be known as liberalism or libertarianism. Or, to differentiate it from the use of the term in America, classical liberalism rather than just liberalism. So what is liberty for a classical liberal? Is it just doing your own thing, whatever comes into your mind, being willful, defying the law, indulging whatever impulse comes into your mind? Is that liberty? Well, that's what the enemies of liberalism have said liberty means. That is, being willful, indulgent, having no control over your impulses. And that goes back a long time. Sir Robert Filmer in England was an advocate of royal absolutism. He wanted the king to have absolute unchecked power. And he argued for that by criticizing the liberalism of the day. He said it will lead to chaos. Anyone will do whatever they want, whatever comes into their mind. There can't be any order. You need to have a boss, as we would say today, a great leader, a dictator, an absolute power with a strong hand to create order. John Locke responded to that, one of the early, we can say, proto-liberal thinkers. And he said, liberty isn't the power to do whatever you indulge in, whatever occurs to you, whatever you think you might want to do. Because if that were the case, no one could enjoy liberty. If you were subject to the power of other people doing whatever they want to, then in what sense could anyone be said to be free? He argued that to enjoy liberty, you must have the rule of law, and that is a core principle of classical liberalism. Let me quote John Locke. It's a bit long, but it's very powerful. The end or purpose of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. Where there is no law, there is no freedom. That's worth repeating. It's a very important idea. Where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. Freedom is not a liberty for every man to do what he lists, that is to say, whatever he wants to do, whatever comes into his mind. For who could be free when every other man's humor might domineer over him? But a liberty to dispose and order, as he lists or as he prefers, his person, actions, possessions, and his whole property within the allowance of those laws under which he is, and therein not to be subject to the arbitrary will of another, but freely follow his own. To be free is to be subject to the rule of law that's the same for everyone, not one rule for you and another rule for the leaders or the rulers or the dictators, but everyone subject to the law, and a law that is equal for every human being. So to enjoy liberty in the classical liberal libertarian tradition is not to be subject to arbitrary power from other people, to be governed by the law, rules that are applicable to everyone and that guarantee to all the right to follow their own wills in those matters concerning their own property. In your home, you may live as you want, but you cannot come into my home and tell me how I must live. I respect you, and you respect me. That is the principle of a free society. Now, for Locke, it's very important to use the word property. And English has changed. It's an interesting, funny language. Like all languages, it evolves and changes. Today, modern speakers of English say, this watch is my property. John Locke would not say that. He'd say, what a strange and puzzling thing to say. A watch is a thing, but a property is a right. How can a watch be a right? He would say, I have a property in this watch. The right to wear it, to look at it, to sell it to someone else, to give it to another person. That's my property in the watch. So property was anything to which you had a right. And as he said, your person, so your life, your actions, your freedom, and your estate, your possessions. That's your watch. So the older meaning of property on which liberalism rested was everything to which you have a right. Your life, no one may take your life or harm you. Your freedom, your right to determine what to do with your life, and your possessions, your stuff, as American teenagers say, your stuff. And this stuff is one way that you realize your freedom. You couldn't enjoy your freedom if you didn't have some stuff. But that is not what property is limited to. It's your life, your freedom, and your stuff. Everything that is proper to you, that connects to you. Now, connection between liberty and law. The two are not opposed to each other, nor is liberty opposed to order. Arbitrary and unaccountable power is the enemy of both liberty and of order. Liberty requires and is grounded on the rule of law, not the rule of man. That is the key distinction. The rule of law, not the rule of man. Now, people who sometimes think that liberty and law are incompatible, people like Sir Robert Filmer and dictators all around the world, they confuse liberty with license, being just out of control. And they confuse law with command. Liberty is not license, and a command is not law. Law is about rules. Lon Fuller from Harvard Law School put it very neatly, a famous classical liberal theorist of law. Law is the enterprise of subjecting human conduct to the governance of rules. That's what law is about. It's about rules that help us to lead our lives. Even a simple one like traffic rules. It's interesting, Jakarta has a lot of traffic. It's complicated, it's difficult for a foreigner to understand. Walking across the street is not easy here. But no one hit me. They understand. You make eye contact with the driver, he slows down, and you walk across the street. It's not like Moses parting the water. There's an order there, and it works pretty well. A simple system of rules allows millions of people to go where they want to go. You don't need to have a central ministry of traffic saying, you go here, you turn left, you turn right, planning everyone's traffic route. That's impossible. But that's the dictator mentality. You have to have that, or you couldn't have traffic. The fact is, traffic rules works with a very simple set of rules. Now, what's important about it is they don't always have to be the same everywhere. In some countries, they drive on the right side of the road, in other countries on the wrong side of the road. Right? But it doesn't matter, so long as everyone drives on the same side. That's the rule. And it works very well. And it can differ from one country to another, so long as it's a rule that everyone understands and we can follow. Now, the core idea of liberty, the key rule here, is called the presumption of liberty. And it's a really powerful and important idea. It's analogous to the presumption of innocence in law. They have the same foundation, the same epistemic feature. They're featured in the limitations of human knowledge. The presumption of innocence says you have to be proven guilty before you can be punished. Imagine it were the other way around, the presumption of guilt. So I say, Joseph Bautista, you are guilty of robbing a bank on Thursday. Prove you are innocent. It's too much to ask. Prove you are innocent. Maybe he could prove, he has pictures, he was someplace else on Thursday. He could not have done it. Then I say, okay, prove you're innocent of robbing a bank on Wednesday. You can't do it. It's too much of a burden. You cannot prove you're innocent of every charge. So we have a principle, the presumption of innocence. If I'm the prosecutor, I must prove Mr. Bautista is guilty before he can be arrested and punished, put in prison. The burden of proof is on me to show why he should lose his freedom. And the same thing with the presumption of liberty. You cannot show every reason why you should exercise your liberty any way you want. Prove to me why you should be allowed to wake up at 7:30 in the morning, or 7:15, or 7:45, or wear a blue shirt, or a brown shirt, or batik. Prove to me all the things you might want to do, why you should be allowed to do it. You can't do it. It's too much of a burden. So the burden of proof is on the one who would restrict your liberty. In the permission society of statism, the idea is you need a permission before you can do anything. So, for example, in the socialist state, you want to bake a birthday cake for your daughter. She's having her birthday. Well, of course you need a permission. You need a license. You have to go to the Ministry of Baking. They say, what kind of cake? Birthday cake. Oh, that's down the hall, birthday cake division. They say, boy or girl? Girl. Okay, that's that window. Sorry, it's closed today. It's closed today. And you can't bake without the permission. You want to sing a song? Go to the Ministry of Music, Division of Songs. What kind of song? Traditional, contemporary, rap, hip-hop? What will it be? Each one has its own unique permission. That's crazy. But that is what the socialists want for us. Everything requires permission. But the liberal perspective is very different. You have the freedom to do what you want. Bake the cake, sing the song. You don't need someone's permission. But there might be a reason to restrict you. For example, when you bake the cake, your oven is so unsafe it generates sparks that burn down your neighbor's house. Okay, that's a reason to stop you from baking the cake, or to restrict your ability to bake a cake, because it will hurt someone else. But the burden is on the one who restricts your freedom to show why. Or, you want to sing a song? Go ahead, sing. But really, please, not in front of my house at 2:30 in the morning with an orchestra. Not there. That would be a reason to restrict you. But you shouldn't require permission to go sing songs. In the permission society, everything that is not allowed is forbidden. But in the free society, everything that is not clearly forbidden is allowed. That is the key distinction. It's a principle of English common law, but it's also a key principle of Islamic jurisprudence. And to quote, "The original state of matter is its permissibility unless there is a specific provision that prohibits it." Same fundamental principle. So not only in English common law, but also in Islamic jurisprudence. Now, liberty understood as the rule of law, having the freedom to do with what you want, with what is yours, your life, your freedom, and your possessions, is that an Asian value? Do Asian people, more than other people, like to be ordered, commanded, threatened, arrested, assaulted with violence for not obeying arbitrary commands? Certainly not the ones who've been assaulted and threatened and arrested and beaten. I was in Myanmar recently, and the founders of the School of Political Science there, Yangon School of Political Science, all were prisoners. All of them were prisoners. And when they were released with the reform in Myanmar, they said it was illegal to teach political science for 5 decades. We are going to teach political science, was their response. They didn't like being arrested. They didn't like the lack of their freedom. They were authentically Asian. There's nothing Asian about being arrested and denied your freedom. Now, those who are suppressed probably don't uphold the value of their own suppression. But maybe one could argue there are some Asian values that are incompatible because, go to the next page for the argument, liberty is a Western idea. It's European. And therefore, by stipulation, it could not be Asian. I disagree very strongly. I think this shows a very primitive understanding of ideas. First, I'm sometimes asked in Europe or in North America, they say, "Oh, do you defend Western values?" And I say, "No." And they're horrified. They say, "How? What do you mean you don't defend Western values?" They're shocked. And I say, "Well, let me ask you the following question. What is a Western value?" They say, "Well, liberty, toleration, rule of law." I say, "Okay, maybe. But aren't there some other values we could identify as Western?" Fascism was founded by an Italian. Marxism by 2 Germans, Marx and Engels. Communism, Leninism. Lenin was a Russian. Hitler was Austrian. Aren't they Westerners? Why are those not Western values as well? Why assume only liberty as a Western value and not all these forms of collectivism and violence as well? The founders of those philosophies were also Westerners. And in fact, as our Chinese friends remind us, Marx and Engels were not Chinese. Lenin was not Chinese. When you go to Communist Party headquarters, whose pictures do you see? Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, oh, and Mao. So, 5 Chinese thinkers in a row. So, if you look at socialism, it's an import to Asia. It's not an indigenous Asian growth. Lin Yutang wrote a very interesting study of the 11th century Chinese sage and poet Su Tongpo. And he noted in contemporary China, writing this many years ago, the influence of what he called Western ideas of collectivism. He said, these are not Chinese ideas, these are Western ideas of collectivism. He identified the philosophy of Lao Tzu as laissez-faire in government and naturalism in ethics. For Lin, although Chinese legalism expressed some elements of what we would call socialist thinking, he said collectivism was an invasive Western species. that was foreign to Chinese tradition, not a homegrown plant. So is liberty an Asian value or a Western value? Well, does any region of the world or any linguistic group or any cultural group have a monopoly on liberty? I don't think so. Ideas don't come with little flags on them, identifying this is only for these people. Think about what that would mean. Antoine Claude Laurent Lavoisier was one of the founders of chemistry. He identified the element oxygen. So a great intellectual achievement to identify oxygen, why things burn. Well, of course that means only French people can use oxygen. Oxygen is only for the French, or speakers of French, so we can count the Canadians and some of the African nations. Koreans cannot use oxygen. Or perhaps just the theory of oxygen. They can't do chemistry, it's a French idea. So chemistry is foreign to Koreans. And of course, the zero as a placeholder for mathematical calculation, only for Hindus, please. The rest of us cannot use the zero. Or yoga as an instrument for health and finding spiritual balance, only for Hindus. Actually, that crazy idea we saw recently in Canada, there was a controversy because yoga was being taught at university, and some people said that's an outrage. Only Hindus can do yoga, not Canadians. How silly and absurd and ridiculous. The fact that an idea may have some history connected with France or with India doesn't mean it's limited to only those people. Only people from that tradition can use that idea. That's foolish and childish. So what about Asian liberty? Liberty is as Asian as it is European, as Northern as it is Southern, as Chinese as it is English, as Thai as it is Greek. It's a human value. It's a value to be ourselves, to be governed by law, to enjoy the dignity of equality with others. And no civilization has a monopoly on that human value or on its expression of it. Moreover, living in the modern world requires liberty. We no longer live in tiny bands that can be subordinated to the alpha male of a troop. Complex societies, and certainly those with billions of people, require not more state control, but more self-control. Coordination of the actions of billions of people emerges as a form of spontaneous order, like traffic. No one plans where everyone is going to go. You set the basic rules, and the order will emerge. People will go where they want to go on their own, as a product of simple rules for a complex social order. Now, my new book, which has just come out, I haven't seen it because it's printed in the United States, is Self-Control or State Control. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this and looking in the psychology of self-control, economics, history, philosophy, and law, and so on. And I started with the text that I personally knew best, the Stoics from Mediterranean culture, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and others. But I was very quickly led to texts from Asia, China, India, and elsewhere, texts of Buddhism, Hinduism, because self-control is central to those traditions. Being mindful, engaging in good behavior, focusing on Dharma, doing the right thing, or in the Confucian tradition, Zhen, Ri, and Yi, human-heartedness, well-ordered behavior, and moral sense. Those ideas are not imports to Asia from abroad. They are articulated by thinkers in Asia. They were nurtured in Asia. In the Analects of Confucius, the master states, to master and control the self and return to well-ordered behavior. That is human-heartedness. We find the articulation of what is known as the Silver Rule, which is a fundamental principle of living together. Zhigong asks the master Confucius, is there one expression that can be acted upon until the end of one's days? That is to say, a consistent moral principle that can guide you through your life. And the master replied, there is Shu. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not want. That's a very good ethical principle for every social order. If you do not want to be beaten and oppressed and robbed, do not do that to others. We find in the Dhammapada, one of the important texts of Buddhism, others do not understand that we must control ourselves. But for those who do understand this, through it, quarrels cease. When each person knows I must control myself, violence and conflict is diminished in society. And indeed, increasingly interdependent groups, complex social orders require, and this is paradoxical, our socialist and statist friends do not understand this. They require not more control from the top, but more control of each person from inside, grasping their own moral responsibilities and living according to their own lives. Greater social coordination in a complex social order requires more self-control, not less. More self-control means less state interventionism. State interventionism undermines good moral character and ethics, and it disrupts social order. When we have self-control, we have the freedom to guide our own actions, to realize our own purposes, and to bear the consequences for them, to be responsible for what we do in life. Now, at the same time, a society of free and responsible persons means greater social order. And this is again what some people find paradoxical. They can't understand. If they think of order, they imagine someone making the order. The dictator, the controller. It's not possible in their minds without it. They think of government as like the gardener that plants every plant, prunes and trims them. They don't see the beauty of spontaneous growth and things emerging spontaneously. They don't understand Wu Wei. The idea in Taoism is of great importance for the free society. Wu Wei is sometimes translated into English as non-activity, but my Chinese friends insist that's not correct. Lu Juning, great scholar in China, has said it's much better to call it active non-activity, which sounds paradoxical. What does that mean, active non-activity? Well, go to the poem of Lao Tzu, written 2,000 years before Adam Smith. He said, the more prohibitions there are, the poorer the people will be. The more edicts are promulgated, the more thieves and bandits there will be. Therefore, a sage has said, so long as I act inactively, the people will of themselves be transformed. So long as I love peace, the people will of themselves go straight. So long as I act only by inactivity, the people will of themselves become prosperous. So what does that mean, act by inactivity? It means set the rules and then step back and let the order emerge. Do not intervene constantly, but actively create the rule of law and then step back. Let the order emerge. And it will create complex forms of order you could never have imagined beforehand. Lao Tzu also said, governing a great country is like frying a small fish. It's puzzling. What does he mean? Well, if you attack the fish with great violence, gutting it with your knife, it will be ruined. And when it's cooking, if you constantly poke at it, if you're that kind of cook who cannot leave the food alone, poke, 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 you'll ruin it. It will be no good. But that's what rulers want to do. They want to poke all the time, intervene in society, fix this, correct that, change this, but they ruin it, they spoil it. So governing a great society is like cooking a small fish. Now, what does that lead us to about government's role? Government has a very important role. We should never underestimate how important that is. To set the rules, to establish rule of law. But it is not the role of government to try to create the order directly, to intervene and direct people and command them and tell them to do this, this, and this. Create basic rules. Do not attack us with knives and poke at us with forks all the time. Let the order emerge. So freedom requires an ethical framework for self-control and the rule of law. And we can use words of Asian provenance, dharma, gen, re, ye, or Greek and Latin words, arete, virtus, and so on. What does it matter? What does it matter what set of words we use or what language they merged in? The fact is that morality withers when the state goes beyond its bounds. Morality and good behavior require limited government to allow people to control themselves, and it creates a virtuous cycle. Good rules create good behavior among individuals. Good behavior creates good order in society. Gurcharan Das, very important Indian writer and businessman, wrote an essay on the Dharma of capitalism. Dharma, this idea, it's difficult to capture in English, of right behavior. When individuals behave in accordance with Dharma, there's order, balance, and trust within society. So doing the right thing, following Dharma, it's not something only for heroic cases, and this is where I disagree with most ethical philosophers. In the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavad Gita, discussion of what to do as the right behavior, Dharma is the first word. It's very powerful. And people think, oh, it's only about heroic actions. Arjuna is called on to engage in a great battle. And it's a difficult choice for him because he will fight against people he knows. And there will be brothers and sons and uncles on the other side. So people assume Dharma is just about great choices, but it's not. It's about the choices we make every day in life. It's about knowing to do the right thing because we have acquired a good moral disposition and moral habit. It's not about opportunism and doing whatever pops into your mind. It's about being self-controlled. Now, the question then is who are the people who can be self-controlled? Is it only Europeans? Is that what Mahathir and others are telling us? That Asian people cannot control themselves? They have no tradition of self-control? This is foolish. I think it's a sad commentary that he had so little trust in his own people that he assumed they could not control themselves. Now, we are told every place, classical liberalism is never from here. In England, at a conference, I was told classical liberalism is not English, it's American. And in Germany, I was told it's not German, it's English. In America, I'm told it's not American, it's European. Or even a sneaky Asian idea to get Americans to buy all those terrible low-priced goods that Asian people make. iPods and iPads and so on. It turns out liberalism is always from someplace else, a sneaky trick to undermine our ability to be ourselves, whoever we are. I think that's foolish. It's not always from somewhere else, it's who we are, wherever we happen to lead. Liberty allows us to be ourselves, not to be forced at gunpoint to follow the commands of others, to live as we choose, to exercise self-control rather than being subject to arbitrary power from others. So is liberty Asian? Is it European or American or African, Australian? Yes, it's all of those and more. We can all enjoy liberty, and this is a remarkable feature about liberalism. Your enjoyment of liberty doesn't diminish mine. It enhances it. It makes more opportunities for voluntary cooperation among persons. When we both have liberty, we both benefit from it. There are opportunities for us to enrich each other. Liberty is the global framework for harmony, and peace, and prosperity. Liberty is good for Asians, who make up 60% of the human population. But here's the key. It's not only good for Asians. It's good for everyone, all across the world, because the opportunities of voluntary interaction enrich all of humanity. With that, I thank you for your attention, but I want to thank you for one more thing. I want to thank you for standing up for justice. I want to thank you for lightening my heart, for making me glad. I want to thank you for giving me hope for the future. Thank you very much.